right, so now that we've managed the registration flow as well as the login flow for our users, the final thing to take care of is how do they actually log out and return back to the welcome screen. In this lesson, that's exactly what we're going to tackle. So right at the top here of this navigation bar, we're going to be adding a logout button. And when the user presses on that logout button, we're going to take them all the way back to the welcome screen. And in order to do this, we need to be able to add in a bar button item to this navigation bar up here. Let's go ahead and do that now. If you head over to the main.storyboard and navigate to our chat view controller, which is this one right here, at the top right here, we want to create a logout button. So let's open up our object library and we're going to search for something called a bar button item. And as they say here, this thing is going to act pretty much the same as a button, but it's going to live in our navigation bar. So let's drag that and drop it on the right over here. And instead of it saying item, we're going to call it log out and then hit enter. Now we can work with this bar button item pretty much exactly the same way as we've been working with normal buttons. So I'm going to create an IB action from this button. So I'm going to hold down the control key and drag it down here, just above that last curly brace. And I'm going to change the type to be more specific, which is the UI bar button item type. And the name is going to be called logout pressed. And then hit enter to connect that up. So now if we go into our chat view controller, you can see that we can now write some code to be triggered when our user decides that they want to log out. So heading back over to the Firebase documentation again, you can see that at the very bottom, you've got a next steps section. And here there is a section on how to sign out our user. And we can do that by using the sign out method. And this sign out method happens to be one that can throw an error. So we have to wrap it inside a do catch block. So let's go ahead and copy this code and implement it inside our logout pressed. So I'm going to hit paste, and now we have to add the required module, which is the Firebase module, as an import up at the top, and so that it'll know what the authentication module is all about. You can either do it the way that we saw as we copied over from Firebase, or alternatively, you can actually simplify things by chaining this part together with the sign out method. So replacing it right here, and then we can delete that extra line. Essentially, what we've got now is a do catch block, and the catch block will get carried out if there were any problems signing out the user. So now let's try this out. Notice how we're going to be going through the login screen quite a few times. So here's a quick tip. When you're building an app that has a login and registration flow, it can be quite frustrating when every time you need to test it, you have to enter in the email and password. To save yourself this effort, what you can do is while you're testing the app and while you're building it, is to simply go into the relevant screen and actually assign it a value. So in this case, my text for this email text field is going to be 1@2.com. And then the text for my password text field is going to be 123456. So those are the details that I use to sign up to my messaging service. And now, whenever I run my app and I go into the login screen, those details will be entered automatically. So I can just simply press login. So now that we've logged in and we're on our chat view controller, let's try out our logout flow. So when I've pressed logout, nothing has happened in here, but I also didn't get any error messages. But let's think about what we would actually like to happen if the sign out process was successful. Well, we want to take our users all the way back to the welcome view controller. So how do we do that? Well, we would add that inside the do block after trying to sign out. If this process was successful, it's going to continue executing the lines of code inside this do block. So it's right here that we want to navigate our user to the welcome screen. But how do we do that? Well, the way that our navigation stack is arranged is such that we've got this at the very bottom, and then we went to the login screen, so this lives on top of this one, and then finally stacked on the very top is our chat view controller. So that's the one that we're seeing in the foreground right here. Now, if I was to click on the back button, that takes me back one level, so it dismisses that chat view controller, destroys it, and if I go back further, it takes me to the welcome view controller. But I don't want to go through 2 levels of back buttons. I want to go straight over here. So how can I do that? Well, there's something called a pop to root view controller method. And that is something that we get as a part of the navigation controller. So we can say navigation controller dot pop to root view controller, and this will pop and get rid of all the view controllers on the stack except the very root view controller. So we can select animated as true as well to get a brief animation if appropriate. And what it should do is it should take us all the way back to the view controller that is at the root of the navigation stack, which is of course our welcome view controller. So let's try that out and run our app. Let's log in once more and then log out, and it takes us all the way back to the welcome view controller. The very last thing I want to fix on this screen is I want to get rid of this back button, because while it makes sense to have a back button on the login and registration screens, because the user might have pressed on the register button and then realized, actually I've already registered, so I can actually log in, and they might have pressed login and realizing that they actually need to register. So that button I think makes sense. But once we get to the chat view controller, I don't think it actually makes a lot of sense in terms of user experience to go from here back to the login screen. So this is something that is up to you really, and it's kind of an individual choice depending on what you think is more natural for your app. But I think I'm actually going to get rid of this back button so that it's less confusing for users, so that they're able to log out straight to the welcome screen and to the screen that shows the name of the app. So in order to hide this back button, I'm going to set that up inside the view did load. And inside here, I'm going to tap into the navigation item, and I'm going to tap into something called hides back button. And this is a Boolean, so true or false. And I'm going to set it to true so that we actually hide this particular button here the next time that we run our app. And now if we log in again, you'll see that in the chat view controller, we no longer have that button right there. But what if you wanted a title for the navigation bar? Well, you can do the same thing inside view did load. You can set the title property to whichever string it is that you want. And in my case, I just want it to say flash chat with the lightning symbol. So I'm going to paste that in here as the title. And now if I run the app again, and once we get to the chat view controller, you'll see that title show up right in the middle, so that we can orientate ourselves to know which app it is that we're actually using right now. So that's all for the logout route. And in the next lesson, we're going to be tackling some things to get rid of all of these strings that we're using all over the place. So for example, we've got a segue identifier here, which is a string. We've got another one right here. And these are really vulnerable because if you have even the slightest typo in here and it doesn't match the name inside the main.storyboard, your app will crash and it'll be quite hard to debug what's going on. So in order to minimize errors in the future, I want to show you how to create a constants file in Swift. So that's what we're going to be doing next, and I hope to see you there.